Okay, in this video, I am going to show you how to mark downbeats on some rhythms using these rhythm drills and these subdivisions over here. These subdivisions should be the same ones that you've already studied. If you don't know these subdivisions, you might want to take a look at this chart and try to understand the math behind it. It's pretty simple. Quarter note divided into two parts equals 2/8 notes. Quarter note divided into three parts equals a triplet, and so on and so forth. And it goes down the chart like that. So let's go over to these rhythm drills over here. So you have two rhythms. These are just straight quarter notes on the bottom here, and those are going to be your downbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're in 4/4 time, so 4 beats per measure. On the top, or sorry, I got that wrong. 4 beats on the top, 4 beats per measure. There's a 4 on the bottom, so therefore a quarter note gets a beat. Right, so that's pretty simple. Now, we're going to put some arrows on the top to mark where those downbeats are. Now, don't use this as your basis. You should be using these rhythms on top as your basis so you can start practicing where the downbeats fall based on these subdivisions. So let's try this. I'm going to get an arrow right here, and obviously there's no pickup beat, so we're going to put the arrow right there for beat 1. Okay, all the arrows are going to go on 1, 2, 3, and 4 of every measure. All right, let's put another one down. Do we put the arrow right here? No, we don't, because that's the and of 1. We're not going to put any arrows on the ands. We're going to put them on the downbeats. So let's get rid of that. Let's try again. We're going to put it here. That's on 1 and 2. Right there on beat 2. All right, let's keep going. Does the next one go here? It does. Since this one took up an entire beat, the entire beat of 2, the next one has to be beat 3. So we're going to put our next arrow here on beat 3. Let's keep going. So does the next arrow go here? Of course not. This entire set of notes, 3, E, and those 4 notes, if we look over here on our chart, makes up an entire quarter note. Right? This is where math comes in. Those 4 16th notes make up an entire quarter note, so therefore our next downbeat is going to be over here. So let's do that. Alright, so let's use our chart again. We have 2 eighth notes. How many beats does that take up? Let's look over here. 2 eighth notes equals 1 quarter note. That takes up our last beat. Therefore, we have our 4 arrows. 1, 2, 3, 4. This measure is done. Let's move on to our next one. The downbeat's going to be the very first note, or rest. But in this case, it's a note. Right? Quarter note equals a quarter note. That's pretty simple. The next beat is going to go right here. Now here we have a triplet. Now real quick, this is kind of important. How do you know a triplet from 3 eighth notes? People mix this up all the time. Look over here at the chart. The triplet has a 3 above it. Over here, these are 3 eighth notes. It is not a triplet because it does not have a 3 above it. Make sure you always note the difference because this is equal to a quarter note, but 3 eighth notes is equal to a dotted quarter note. There's a huge difference there and people mess it up a lot. So make sure you always look for that tiny 3. Now that we know that difference, we know that the triplet is equal to a quarter note. We should move on past that and go to our next downbeat. Now we should remember this from before. 2 eighth notes equals a quarter note. Therefore, we're moving on to our next downbeat, which is right here, the rest. People make mistakes all the time. They think rests, since they don't make any sound, they don't get time. But they do. They do take up time. They just don't make sound. But this is a quarter rest. It is equal to a quarter note. Now you don't see rests on this chart, but rests are equal to notes. So just remember that. All right, our next downbeat will obviously be beat number 1. Okay, now what kind of rest is this? It's an eighth rest, just a single eighth rest. So we don't see too many of this over here. It's kind of like chopping this one in half. So we have this one is essentially silent, and this one is sounding. Here's our silent one, here's our sounding one. 1 and 2. Here's our downbeat. We found it. All right, let's keep going. That's an entire quarter note. There's not going to be any more arrows down there. So we know the next one will fall on this one. Now we've seen this before. There's that 3 again. 3 notes that have a 3 above it, that's a triplet. Therefore, that's equal to a quarter note. We can move on past those to the next downbeat. A quarter note equals a quarter note. That's beat 4. Let's check our progress so far. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's our measure. We did a good job. 1, 2, 3, 4. Measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Measure. We're doing good so far. So our downbeat, that's pretty easy. Now, half note. How many quarter notes is in a half note? Let's check our box over here. Half note equals 2 quarter notes. So that means, and it even shows right here, here's our 2 quarter notes underneath the half note. So that means we're going to have to put 2 arrows for this half note. Let's do that. And don't just put 2 arrows right next to each other like this. That doesn't solve anything, right? You should, sorry about that. What you should do actually is put the arrows spaced where they should be, because this beat number 2 is happening right here. Okay? Now, where's beat 3 going to happen? Is it going to happen somewhere in between these 2 beats? Of course not. It's going to happen right here on beat 3, because these 2 quarter notes take up the entire amount of space. Okay, we're almost done. We have 4/16 notes. Double check your chart. 4/16 notes equals the entire quarter note. So our next and last arrow should go here. And that makes perfect sense, because the quarter note equals the very last bit of time that we have. So I hope that all of that makes sense. I know that's a lot to deal with, and rhythm can be very, very confusing. But if you practice it and go through all of these rhythm drills, making sure you mark all the downbeats, and then I recommend that you set a metronome, preferably to a very low setting, maybe 65 beats per minute, and tap the lower quarter notes while saying and tapping the upper notes, making sure you stay with the metronome the entire time. It will be very helpful for your rhythm skills. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope this has been helpful. Have a lovely day.